Day 11, and everyone is asking the same question, 11 days in. That's all it's been. And already the scale of what has happened is almost too big to absorb. Over 2,500 Israeli airstrikes delivered, Iran's entire air force gone, the supreme leader dead, his son now stepping into those shoes, 80% of Iran's air defenses confirmed destroyed, the Parchin and Shahrud missile production facilities, the places where Iran built its long-range rockets, reduced to rubble, 6 American aircraft carrier strike groups sitting in the region. The most concentrated display of Western air power since World War II, filling Iranian skies. Think about that for a moment, really sit with it. And yet, no ground invasion, no tanks rolling across the border, no armored columns pushing into Iranian territory, none of it. So here's the question that every military analyst, every retired general, every concerned citizen watching the news has been asking. If you've come this far, why stop in the air? The comfortable answer, the one you'll hear on television, the one that fits neatly on a news ticker, is that the air campaign is working so well that ground troops simply aren't necessary. Clean, simple, easy to believe. But that answer isn't honest. The honest answer is far more unsettling and far more important. Because the truth isn't that a ground invasion is being postponed for the right moment. The truth is that a ground invasion of Iran is a mathematical and strategic impossibility. Full stop. And it's the kind of impossibility that every serious military planner on both sides of the Atlantic understands privately, even when nobody will say it out loud on camera. So let me say it out loud right now, because you deserve the full picture. Start with one number 70,000. Not 600,000, not 300,000, 70,000. That's the realistic estimate of how many Israeli combat-capable ground troops could actually be redirected toward a major external military operation right now, today. On March 10th, 2026, the Israel Defense Forces have roughly 170,000 active duty personnel in total: Army, Air Force, Navy, Special Operations, everything. But you can't just pick up all 170,000 and ship them somewhere. Large portions are already locked in place and can't be moved. There are troops along the Gaza border maintaining the security presence after Hamas. There are units in the West Bank managing an occupied territory of 3 million Palestinians in ongoing tension. There are air defense crews operating the Arrow, David Sling, and Iron Dome batteries, working around the clock, having intercepted hundreds of Iranian ballistic missiles and drones over the past 11 days. There are naval forces monitoring the Mediterranean and Red Sea, and critically, as of this very week, IDF ground forces have already entered southern Lebanon in a new ground incursion, with Israeli Defense Minister Israel Katz authorizing the operation on March 3rd. 3 divisions are now deployed in Lebanon, and they are already clashing with Hezbollah fighters. Once you subtract everything already tied down, everything already committed, the realistic deployable force left for an Iranian operation is approximately 70,000 troops. Hold that number, hold it tight. Now hold it against this one, 1,648,000. That's the land area of Iran in square kilometers. Iran is 74 times larger than Israel. Let that sink in for a second, minus 74 times. Military doctrine, and we're talking about established doctrine from the US Army's own field manuals, from NATO operational planning guides, recognizes that occupying and pacifying hostile territory requires a minimum of 1 soldier for every 50 civilians as a baseline. Apply that to Iran's population of roughly 85 to 90 million people, and you arrive at a requirement of well over half a buffer million troops just to manage the territory at minimum, before you even account for mountainous terrain, cities, and the kind of ideologically motivated defenders who will fight for every street corner. Here's a comparison that might help put this in perspective. At the height of the Iraq surge in 2007, the United States deployed 166,000 troops, supplemented by over 100,000 private military contractors, to manage a country of 25 million people. Iraq covers 438,000 square kilometers. That effort, with the full weight of the world's most powerful military behind it, still produced 5 to 10 American fatalities every single week at its most intense phase. It lasted nearly a decade. It cost over $2 trillion. Iran is 3.8 times larger than Iraq. It has 3.6 times the population. The math produces a minimum ground force requirement of approximately 600,000 combat troops. Israel has 70,000 available. The gap between 70,000 and 600,000 is not a scheduling problem. It's not a logistics challenge you can work around. It is a fundamental impossibility, and no amount of political will, no presidential speech No amount of air supremacy changes that arithmetic. Now add Lebanon because Lebanon just caught fire. This is where theoretical impossibility becomes documented, real-time, visible on satellite images, operational reality. On March 2nd, 2026, just 4 days into what's being called Operation Epic Fury, Hezbollah launched its first missile and drone attacks on northern Israel since the ceasefire of November 2024. They targeted a missile defense site south of Haifa. The fragile peace that Lebanon's Prime Minister Nawaf Salam had worked hard to maintain collapsed in hours. Hezbollah's Secretary General Naim Qassem vowed retaliation. He declared that the era of patience had ended. And in the weeks since, the Lebanon front has escalated from missile exchanges to ground contact. More than 500,000 people have been displaced. At least 500 people have died in Lebanon, including 83 children. Hezbollah has attacked the Ramat David air base in northern Israel with drone swarms. It has issued 5-kilometer evacuation warnings to northern Israeli residents. The same kind of warnings Israel issues before its own strikes. And Israeli ground troops are now engaged in direct clashes inside Lebanese territory. Let me be clear about why this matters so much. This is exactly the scenario that every military analyst who opposed an invasion of Iran always described as the decisive constraint. The moment Israeli ground forces commit to a major external operation, Lebanon ignites. Not necessarily because Hezbollah wants a full-scale war. There are reports that even Hezbollah's own parliamentary allies were surprised by the decision to fire, having been given assurances the group would stay out. Hezbollah's leadership knew that another war in under 2.5 years carried serious domestic political risks inside Lebanon. But they intervened anyway. And now Israel is fighting on the Iranian air campaign front, the Lebanon ground and air front, and maintaining security in Gaza and the West Bank, while simultaneously intercepting Iranian ballistic missiles and drones all at the same time. Here's the most revealing statement to come out of the IDF in 11 days. The IDF Northern Command itself confirmed it was unlikely to initiate a larger ground invasion into Lebanon until the situation with Iran was calmer, if at all. Read that sentence carefully. The IDF is saying it cannot fully commit to Lebanon while Iran is active. Lebanon, a country 1/4 the size of Iran and 55 kilometers from Israel's northern border. A country Israel has fought 4 times in 40 years with pre-positioned supplies, established logistics, deep operational familiarity. If they can't fully commit to Lebanon, what does that tell you about Iran? The supply line that makes it impossible on paper? Here's something that doesn't get discussed enough, maybe because it requires a bit of geography and history, but stick with me because this is crucial. The nearest point of Israeli territory to the nearest point of Iranian territory is approximately 1,000 kilometers by air, by land through Iraq or through Syria. And Iraq combined, supply convoys would travel between 1,600 and 2,000 kilometers. Now, for comparison, think back to World War II. The Allied supply line from the Normandy beaches to the Rhine River, the longest sustained land supply chain in the entire history of that war, was approximately 800 kilometers. And that supply line created what American military planners called the Red Ball Express crisis, a near-constant shortage of fuel and ammunition that slowed the Allied advance and contributed directly to the failure of Operation Market Garden. The Allied supply line running through liberated, friendly French territory, with local populations helping, with established roads, was 800 kilometers, and it almost broke the campaign. The supply line from any Israeli staging point to Tehran is twice that length through actively hostile territory, every liter of fuel for every tank, every artillery shell, every food ration, every medical supply, every replacement part for every armored vehicle, all of it traveling 1,600 kilometers through Iraq, a country whose national security advisor has formally stated it will not allow groups to cross its border for military operations against Iran, and whose parliament has passed resolutions demanding the expulsion of all American forces. There is no friendly Kuwait-style partner providing a logistics base. There is no allied government managing safe airspace. There is no host nation support of any kind, just hostile territory for the entire length of the supply chain. Let's be real, that supply line doesn't exist, and without it, the invasion doesn't exist. Then there's the nuclear question, and this is where it gets truly serious. Iran does not currently possess an operational nuclear weapon, at least not officially. The International Atomic Energy Agency confirmed as recently as March 3rd that no systematic structured weapons manufacturing program was found. Good news, right? Here's the uncomfortable part. Iran has accumulated enough 60% enriched uranium. The last confirmed IAEA figure was 440.9 kilograms before inspections were suspended in June 2025. That's processed through centrifuges known to exist in underground facilities at Fordow and Natanz. It could produce weapons-grade material sufficient for 10 to 12 nuclear warheads within weeks of a political decision to do so. The key phrase is political decision. Iran has stopped short of that final step because historically, the cost deeper sanctions, total international isolation, near certain military response has outweighed the benefit. That calculation is held barely, but it's held. A ground invasion changes that calculation completely. Think about it from the perspective of Iran's new supreme leader, Mojtaba Khamenei, elected on March 8th with full backing of the Revolutionary Guard. He watched his father, the man who led Iran for decades, 4 killed by American missiles. He arrives at supreme power with armored columns potentially approaching his capital. He looks at history. Iraq, 2003, no nuclear weapon. Invaded Libya, 2011, gave up its nuclear program, regime destroyed. The lesson of the modern era is brutal and simple. Countries without nuclear weapons get invaded. Countries with them do not. The invasion designed to prevent Iran from going nuclear could be the very event that makes Iran go nuclear within weeks rather than decades. And here's where the geography of mutual destruction becomes the coldest, most uncomfortable arithmetic of this entire conversation. Israel is a country of 9 million people concentrated in a handful of urban centers: Tel Aviv, Jerusalem, Haifa, Beersheba. These cities are not scattered across a vast territory. A single nuclear warhead delivered to the Tel Aviv metropolitan area, which houses over 4 million people within 50 kilometers, would represent a catastrophic proportion of the country's entire population in a single strike. Iran is the opposite. 85 million people spread across 1.648 million square kilometers, dozens of cities, massive territorial depth. Israeli strategic planners understand this asymmetry. They sit with it. It is precisely why Israel has maintained its own unofficial nuclear deterrent for decades, not as a weapon to use, but as a guarantee that enemies must factor in before contemplating existential attacks. The moment Iran crosses the nuclear threshold, deterrence works in both directions. And when deterrence works in both directions, any conventional conflict carries the risk of escalation that neither side can fully control. That's not a theoretical concern. That is the logic that has governed nuclear deterrence since Hiroshima. No air campaign changes it. No carrier group changes it. Watch what the IDF is actually doing, not what it's saying. Here's a reliable rule in military analysis. Don't listen to what commanders say in press conferences. Watch what they do. Israel's official spokespeople, when asked directly about ground troops in Iran, have said only that all options are on the table. In military contexts, that phrase almost always means the option being. Named is not currently planned. It's the diplomatic way of declining to answer. The Jerusalem Post reported on March 9th that the IDF was expanding its presence in southern Lebanon as a deterrent measure, while simultaneously declining to commit to a large-scale ground invasion of Lebanon. They are hedging. They are reinforcing incrementally. They are not committing. If Israel's military planners are declining to fully commit to Lebanon, a country they know intimately, with a shared border, pre-positioned logistics, and 4 decades of operational experience, then the impossibility of simultaneously committing to Iran, 1,700 kilometers away through hostile territory, requiring 600,000 troops and risking nuclear breakout, becomes self-explanatory. You don't even need to finish the argument. The behavior tells the story. What about America? What is Washington actually saying? The Trump administration's own words tell you what its private assessment of the ground option actually is. President Trump has said the U.S. has a virtually unlimited supply of heavy weaponry. He's expressed confidence in a big American victory. He has reshared opinion pieces arguing there is no need for a U.S. invasion force and that the Iranian people themselves are the boots on the ground. That last sentence, stop there. The Iranian people are the boots on the ground is not a military strategy. It is a statement of hope in the absence of a plan. It is what you say when the operation you are executing cannot by itself produce the political outcome you've said you want. The U.S. National Intelligence Council, according to Washington Post reporting on a classified assessment completed 1 week before the war began, concluded that the Iranian regime was unlikely to be toppled even by a large-scale assault. That assessment was not changed when the bombs started falling. and 11 days in the assessment has been proven accurate. Mojtaba Khamenei is the supreme leader. The Revolutionary Guard has pledged allegiance to him. The Interim Leadership Council was replaced by legitimate succession. The regime is not fallen. The Iranian people have not risen up and taken over their government, as Trump publicly urged them to do. The CIA-backed Kurdish ground option, the proxy substitute for an actual invasion, has been assessed by U.S. intelligence itself as lacking the capability, the unity, and the logistics to succeed. We are not watching a plan unfolding. We are watching the limits of a plan that goes only so far and stops. So what is this war, really? Here is what you are watching. Two things are colliding. The first is the genuine, documented, extraordinary tactical capability of the U.S.-Israeli air campaign. It has achieved air dominance over Iran. It has destroyed 80% of Iran's air defenses. It has eliminated 300 ballistic missile launchers. It killed the supreme leader. It struck the missile production facilities. It has demonstrated precision and operational complexity that has no real historical precedent at this scale. All of that is real. All of that happened. The second thing is the permanent, mathematical, unalterable gap between tactical air supremacy and the political outcome that air supremacy alone cannot deliver. There's a military publication, the U.S. Naval Institute Proceedings, where an officer put it as plainly as it can be said, without an invasion, which is almost certainly not in the cards, regime change depends on some element, changing the political makeup of the regime from within. The regime has a new supreme leader. The Guard has pledged allegiance. The succession worked. The political makeup has not changed from within. And the invasion that would theoretically force that change isn't coming for 7 documented reasons. Insufficient ground troops, short by a factor of nearly 9, a live 2-front constraint in Lebanon being tested right now in real combat, a nuclear breakout acceleration risk that a ground invasion uniquely and dangerously creates, a 1,600-kilometer supply line through a hostile country with no partner support and no host nation cooperation anywhere in the region, the domestic American political impossibility of committing forces to a country 3 times the size of Iraq after 20 years and $2 trillion in the last attempt, and the fundamental doctrine embedded in the DNA of the Israeli Defense Forces itself that wars are fought outside Israel's borders, and that anything risking enemy fighters inside those borders is not a war worth starting. The distance you're watching is not hesitation. The space between the extraordinary air campaign and the ground invasion that never comes, that distance is not hesitation. It is not waiting for the right moment. It is not international pressure holding Israel back. It is recognition embedded in every military planning document, confirmed in every private assessment from every serious analyst who has sat down and honestly done the arithmetic, crossing that line, putting boots on Iranian soil in the numbers. The mission would actually could trigger a chain of consequences that no air campaign, no reserve mobilization, no American carrier group, and no unofficial nuclear deterrent can fully contain. That recognition is not weakness. It is the clearest, most cold-eyed strategic calculation this war has produced. And it tells you more honestly than any press conference ever will what the ceiling of this conflict actually is, and why the question of what comes next remains on day 11 as unanswered as it was on day 1. Here's what to watch in the next 48 hours. Share this, then watch carefully. Watch Lebanon. Specifically, watch whether Hezbollah's Radwan Commando Force, the Elite 2000 strong ground assault units that spent a decade preparing to infiltrate northern Israel, begins moving south from Beirut. So far, they've mostly been kept back. Mostly, that word is carrying a tremendous amount of strategic weight right now. Watch whether the IDF commits additional divisions to Lebanon while the Iranian front remains active. Watch the Interceptor stockpile reports, because those batteries aren't infinite. And every missile intercepted is one less for tomorrow. Watch the munitions replenishment requests to Congress. Watch whether Trump reshares more opinion pieces about Iranian boots on the ground, or whether someone in the National Security Council finally produces an actual answer to the forward question this war has never answered. What comes next? The air campaign is extraordinary. The math of the ground invasion is impossible. And the gap between those two facts is where the entire future of this conflict lives.